Greetings and salutations. I'm the music god, CJ Plain. This is the Noize Report. You know what we do here? We laugh, we have fun, we interview cool and interesting people. Pretty much anyone I can con into coming on this train wreck of a show. And today, I have a whole big giant room full of people that are all part of a very cool thing. Few of them are actually part of another project that I saw last year called Rocktopia. But for this one, as you see down here in the corner, there's a poster that says Rock Me Amadeus. And it is a cool new musical experience that we're going to speak about today and a bunch of other things. So we're going to start by letting everyone introduce themselves and kind of give you a little bit of background on who they are, what they do, and sort of why they're here. Start with Mr. Tony Bruno over here. If you don't know that name, well, you've probably been living under a rock because he's done just about everything, including my favorite female vocalist, Joan Jett.
Oh my God. She's one of my favorite too.
Yes,
hi there. I am, as Jim said, I am the famous or infamous Tony Bruno, co-creator and guitar player in this fabulous Rock Me Amadeus show that you'll all be seeing soon enough.
Yay.
I'm pointing to the next guy.
I'm Toby Rand. I am the singer for Rock Me Amadeus, a rock and roll singer, and from Australia. And I was found by Tony Bruno, who actually put a band together for my solo work about 5 years ago, I think it is, and we became dear friends. And so I'm very fortunate to be playing in this epic new musical.
Yeah, and you may remember him. He didn't mention it, but you may remember him from this minor little thing on TV called Rockstar Supernova.
Yes. I was half the size that I am now, so that was a long time ago.
Still one of the best on the show, though.
We're going counterclockwise. We're going counterclockwise on my screen, so that would be you next, Kia.
Okay, got it. I'm like Hollywood squares. I'm all shuffled up.
I'm up here.
I'm Kia Warren. I'm one of the lead vocalists on Rock Me Amadeus. And I don't even know. I think I met Tony through Rob Clores when I was performing background vocals for a man called Jesse Malin. And then I got to meet all these beautiful people. And I used to grow up watching Toby on Rockstar Supernova.
Right, Rob? Rob gave me your name, and then I met you. I came to see you play with you were at Liza's show at Berlin.
Oh my, was I singing with her, or were you just oh my God. Yeah. Just right in that infamous timing. So yeah, stoked to be here.
Nice. And last but never least.
Hey, I'm Alyson Cambridge. I'm the co-creator and co-producer of Rock Me Amadeus. Unlike these other folks, I am from the world of opera and classical music. So that's where I've had the majority of my career, at the Met, and Kennedy Center and whatnot, singing operas. And then Tony and I worked together on Broadway in that aforementioned show and became sort of like the most unlikeliest of friends. And, one summer night up at the Glimmerglass Festival, an opera festival in upstate New York, we were out to dinner and we said, hey, let's start a new show together. And that is how Rock Me Amadeus was born. And we were lucky enough to get this incredible cast together for this epic musical fusion show.
Awesome. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said that and COVID. We had the luxury of what are we going to do this year while we can't go out? I'm like, well, Good idea that we decided to launch a show because now we got nothing but time.
Nice. I love the concept behind this, behind what Rocktopia does. Artists that push boundaries have always been my favorite. as a small child, bands like Queen and Electric Light Orchestra and Jethro Tull were kind of my favorites because they just, they were always pushing the envelope into new things. So, even though I grew up on a lot of country from my grandfather and a lot of Southern rock from my father, progressive music kind of always held this huge interest in me. And then I got into classical music, and I love the concept of this, that somebody, is taking classic stuff in a sense, classical on both sides, really, and creating new concepts with it. And almost, I don't want to say Trans-Siberian Orchestra created the concept, but they kind of maybe brought it mainstream to people. And I love that. And I think it's awesome that you guys are doing this, and kudos on all the work that must go into this, because I know as someone who's learning music production, my brain is kind of, not wrapping around how hard it must be to make it work.
Yeah, CJ's deep in the throes of learning music theory,
Trying
music
to.
production, Reaper, or like all kinds of,
Yeah. I'm actually going to LA Film School, so I'm trying to learn from professionals somewhat. I guess I'm hoping for $78,000 that I learn from professionals. So it's a crap ton of money, but kind of, I guess, talk about, like, how did the concept come about? Like, because I guess not everyone would think to put Beethoven with Led Zeppelin, even though they kind of, have a structural basis of each other.
But I think those guys did, though. I think
Yeah.
when you go back and listen to a lot of those Zeppelin chord progressions, things like that, there's a bunch of artists too. Even like Randy Rhoads as a guitar player, he was very medieval in his approach to guitar playing. It was classical music played on a Les Paul, and it goes back to like even people like Eric Carmen. It's funny.
Oh my God, I love Eric Carmen.
Yeah, so that song "All by Myself," that piece at the transition, it's a Rachmaninoff piece.
Yeah,
and he literally had to credit Rachmaninoff with it, because it's like he just ripped it off note for note. But it's in that song.
Yeah, one of my favorite songs growing up is "All by Myself," and then a couple years ago, Dimash did his version of it, and I don't know if you've ever heard Dimash sing, but he's a complete alien. Like, he's got like a 6.5 or 7 octave vocal range, and it's just it's unreal to watch him perform these pieces of music that he's kind of like the male version of Sarah Brightman, where he has this unreal range of styles and ways he can perform. And when he did that song, I literally just sat in my studio and cried when I heard it, because he took a beautiful song and he made it so ghostly sounding, it's so haunting. And I was just like, oh man, like dude, you suck for making me cry. But I guess that's what great music does, is it moves you. So
I think, I'll speak sort of for the classical aspect of it. Similar to you, CJ, I grew up listening to all different types of music. And, my father listened to like calypso and reggae, and then eventually like disco and funk. And I liked pop and rock music. And my mother loved classical music. And I was a pianist, a classical pianist in the early days, and it was completely by accident, honestly, that I ended up getting into being an opera singer, because I just had a natural ability for that. So, teachers wanted to train me. But my ear and my musical desires were always so varied in terms of what I like to listen to. And so when the opportunity came to be a part of a show that mashed up and fused all of those worlds together, I just had to jump at the chance. And, in the opera world, unfortunately, there's very much a stigma attached to it that it's elitist, that it's not for everybody, that it's not accessible, that it's not cool, that it's not sexy, all these things. And so, when we create these mashups, and when we're, as producers, putting together the visual elements of the show, when we're creating these music videos, the visual aspect as well as the musical have to fuse together in this really great way. And what I have found is that so many people who wouldn't normally be interested in listening to opera or classical music, they see these music videos, they hear what we're doing, and they're like, whoa, I had no idea that was possible. I had no idea that I would actually enjoy the sound of a symphony orchestra or an operatic voice. And then there's that surprise wow factor that happens when, for example, we have a holiday video out right now where in part of the song, I start singing Silent Night, and then Kia comes in with her incredible, just like raspy, like soulful version of Silent Night, and the two come together, and it's this beautiful synergy and harmony. And that's it's what we do within our show. And so I love the fact that we're exposing different people to different genres of music in this really cool and unexpected way. And I hope it continues to bring more and new audiences to all the different genres of music.
Yeah, I have this thing where closed-minded people, as far as like people that are closed-minded about music, I would challenge them. I'm like, look, one thing, just go home, watch Repo the Genetic Opera. And after you watch that, tell me that you don't like classical music or you don't like different styles of music, because it's one of them things that when you see it, like you just said, the visual style combined with the music and everything else, you can't watch that and not just be utterly amazed at what they do. Like, it's just so breathtaking in its style and scope. And I'll challenge anybody. Like, look, watch that movie and tell me that classical music isn't cool. Because, Sarah is just fucking brilliant to me. Like, she's one of the most beautiful people. And Dimash, like I said, was somebody that I was introduced to last year, during the COVID thing. I was doing reactions on YouTube, and somebody said, you got to react to this kid named Dimash. And okay. And I went, and just immediately, like I said, tears, because his voice it's so haunting. And, but it has all of these elements of rock and pop and soul. And, his vocal range is so massive that he literally can sing all of these styles. And it's breathtaking to me. So again, going back to this, I love that the concept that the music, there should be no rules in music. And
sure, yeah.
And to me, that's kind of the closed-minded thing, is people who say, oh, I don't like heavy metal, or I don't like hip hop, or I don't like country, or I don't like this. And it's never, to me, it's never a good reason to not like it. It's always some preconceived notion that they've been taught growing up. I don't like soul music because of this. I don't like hip hop because of this. I don't like metal because of this. They have this preconceived notion of, metalheads are crazy, or hip hop artists are gangsters, or some stupid preconceived notion, and usually it stops them from.
Yeah. The term people use all the time, which I hate, is like, well, it's not real music. and about any genre. You know, I mean, people say that about pop, about hip hop. I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's not what? Explain to me exactly what real music is. And if you say, you know, classical music is real music, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to argue with you, but it's only one style of real music.
Well, what is? I guess the bigger question is, what is music? Because I mean, music is.
Getting my coffee while you ponder that.
You know, music to me is anything that moves your soul, and whether it's Patti LaBelle and Aretha Franklin, or whether it's Devin Townsend and Rob Halford, or whether it's Alan Jackson and Reba McEntire, you know, they're all amazing artists within the concepts of what they do. And, you know, I couldn't imagine a life without any of them. You know, like, it's just, I listen to so much music that I would be bored if I didn't listen to all of the, you know, it's like walking into a restaurant that has a buffet and then only eating the fish or only eating the chicken, you know. And it's like, you have all of this in front of you. Why do you choose not to partake of it or to use it, you know? So, yeah. So one of the other people, you know, we're just going to mention it real quick because it may or may not bring people. And one of the other people that are part of this, I don't know if he's a full-time member or not, is Dee Snider. How did Dee get involved with this? Because he kind of seems like an unlikely person.
I have a funny story about Dee. And when he was first part of the show that we all did on Broadway, I knew that he was going to be a special guest star. But I wasn't sure about whatever his first day was. And I recall being in my dressing room and hearing a male voice go, oh, 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 oh. And I just thought to myself, I was like, who's doing operatic warm-ups? I'm the only opera singer in this show at that time. And lo and behold, it was Dee Snider. And
Nice.
and he came into the dressing room to wish us luck on the first show that he was going to be in. And I said, was that you doing those warm-ups? And he said, yes. Turns out we had a voice teacher in common that we had both studied with in the past. And he explained how, he kept his vocal cords healthy for the most part over all these years by having somebody train him classically.
Nice.
And so the respect that he had for and continues to have for the classical musicians and singers in the show has been awesome. And although he's not currently in the version moving forward, he's been such a big supporter of this show, of the concept, and of everybody in this cast. He's just one of the most amazing colleagues and artists, and we're so lucky to have had him for as many years as we've been building this show.
Nice. So I'm gonna get Kia and Toby involved here too, because you guys are kind of just sitting back. Kia, talk a little bit about your background and how you kind of got. I mean, you mentioned a little bit how you met Tony, but I guess talk a little bit about your actual role within this and some of what you do for it.
Yeah, so the first iteration of the show, I love the nickname that I gleaned from the show, which was the Sorceress, and I kind of took that and ran with it because it feels like the perfect kind of integration of my background. I grew up singing in church, and in Christmas we would learn Handel's Messiah, and we were singing,
Nice.
All these crazy harmonies. And my first vocal coach, was actually the choir director at St. John's University and Voices of Victory. So I had a very strong appreciation, if not a little bit of classic training. I wouldn't say operatic, but it was very much in the scheme of traditional Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
And through gospel in there, we would do like pop covers of the time. So that was my basis. And I just always grew up. My uncle and my father in the 70s, they owned a record store in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. So they would always play Jamaican music, same like you, Ali, funk music, pop music, classical music, standards, American songbook. And at Saturday at 8 a.m., when that music played, that means get up and start cleaning the house. So you'd have to have music playing for the duration of the house being cleaned. And whether or not I recognized it, those things were, I was being steeped in that music, you know what I mean? And then I started, wanting to perform. I sang with a girl group when I was in my teens. I did choir again when I was in college. I did a few solo. I did sing with a girl group called Charisma.
More about this.
Charisma with a K. Asterisk for you, Tony. More about this, more on that later.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I graduated from college, I kind of felt like I didn't really have a path musically. I would always sing and write and background vocalist and all those things, but I just didn't really have a path. So I went into film, and that brought me to Montauk, and I found my first band that I fronted, which was Revel in Dimes. And the root of that band was Mississippi Delta Blues. So R.L. Burnside, Junior Kimbrough, you know what I mean? And we kind of updated that with our own sound. And I would backtrack, Nina Simone was always like in my head. And I'm like, okay, she's studying Debussy and she's doing Ravel and she's doing Rachmaninoff and starting to put the pieces together. And then that blues group led me to my current group. They're two female front women, myself and Liza Colby. And we have a band called Susu, and we just pull from, we're doing vaudevillian acts, we're doing burlesque references. It's a rock and roll group. We have punk flourishes in there, soul. So I've just kind of always been like a field explorer in music and like pulling it all together. And nice. I hope I can bring that and honor that in Rock Me Amadeus, which does that so well on a larger scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You'd love that band, TJ.
Yeah, like I said, I love people who are visionaries in music. Like one of my biggest heroes, or the people that when I started this music production thing, one of the first questions I was asked is, what do you hope to achieve? And I knew immediately. I said, I want to be the new Rick Rubin, because I want to be that guy that when you walk into my studio, I don't care what you bring me, whether it's reggae, whether it's metal, whether it's punk, whether it's jazz, blues. I want to be able to make you sound like you paid me $1 million. And, Rick was that guy, that New York kid who, Run DMC and the Beastie Boys and Johnny Cash and Slayer and Danzig and all of these eclectic bands that nobody else would touch, and just created sonic soundscapes that today are legendary. I mean, think about Rain and Blood and License to Ill and, everything that Run DMC has done. And, and then Johnny Cash came along. Here's a guy who, he was already a legend. And Rick took Johnny and completely reinvented Johnny almost when they did the last few records, So, I mean,
but it is as you say, when different genres are in conversation with each other, it does surprise the audience. It does expand their horizons of but it shocks the musician too. Like, it pushes us to kind of, whoa, okay, so wait, Kate Bush and Flight of the Valkyries do go together. I've been inspired in even my own work through Rock Me Amadeus to explore that conversation. Did a mashup of Nina Simone and Ted Nugent, which you were like, what are those two doing together? Right. But it's this kind of interplay that challenges you sonically, but also like, in the world culturally and politically. So this has been.
By the way, I forget to mention that did anybody watch the McCartney 3-2-1
with him and Rick Rubin?
Yeah,
I did watch that.
No,
unreal.
Incredible.
CJ, if you haven't seen it, you got to see this.
I have to, because like I said, I am I am such a fan of what Rick has done. And Jim Steinman is another one who,
Yeah.
When you think about what Jim did, I more on the composer side, but Making Love Out of Nothing at All and Total Eclipse of the Heart and Bat Out of Hell. I mean, Jim wrote music that, again, was rock music, but it was very classically based, with big orchestral pieces. And I love the fact that Meatloaf sort of handed the reins to Caleb with, Nightland Express and said, hey, continue this and keep it going. And, Caleb has just taken that ball and run with it and is doing so well with it. Toby, growing up in Australia, man, I'm kind of jealous because the music that you would have grown up with over there is absolutely some of my favorite. I am an absolute massive fan of John Farnham and Jimmy Barnes. And as an American, we didn't get to hear them on the radio. So I am so jealous that you got to grow up and hear those guys on the radio.
First of all, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was literally about to mention both those guys because they're actually, so John Farnham is he's got a new documentary out called Finding the Voice, and I'm actually good friends. Well, his manager used to manage me.
Oh wow.
Glenn Wheatley for about 2 years. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago as well. But I'm friends with both those guys' sons, and to say that I'd actually be in the same room as anyone like that when I was growing up in Australia, as a 12-year-old singing it at school or whatever, would have been a dream.
Right.
Now witnessing it as a grown man and like reflecting on how important they are to Australian culture, both those guys, Jimmy Barnes, because I'm not sure if you know, but Jimmy Barnes was in the news yesterday. He's actually quite sick as well.
I don't like hearing that.
Both those guys. I mean, if you got the other Tony, you're probably familiar with John Farnham and Jimmy Barnes. Particularly Jimmy Barnes. Jimmy Barnes seems to have a voice that sounds like it sounds like a turbine.
Yeah.
But it can actually, and it feels like it chews up things in the way. And so if there's any instrument in the way, he could out sing a guitar. You know what I mean? So, there's the type of guy that those guys we grew up on. It's very working class kind of rock and roll singers in Australia, which was interesting because I grew up in a classical music home. My mum was taught. She grew up in Wales, which is arguably the best choirs in the world, the Welsh choirs. So she put me into choirs when I was probably, from the age of 5 until it wasn't cool for me anymore, which was about 12 when I started getting picked on. So I said, well, I'll do sport then. And then my brothers were in rock bands and they grew up listening to the people that you mentioned. And we have people like the Hoodoo Gurus, Hunters and Collectors, Gang of Jang, all these Australian bands. That was
Angels, Rose Tattoo.
Rose Tattoo.
I'm a massive fan of Australian music. It's Japanese music and Australian music are like, for some reason, they just resonate with me. Like the music from those two countries, and I don't know what it is, but sadly, most people, when you mention Australian music, they'll say, "Oh, well, AC/DC," and they may mention like Darren Hayes or Delta Goodrum, but that's sort of like the extent of what they know. And I'm like, dude, there's so many Australian artists who are just absolutely disgustingly brilliant musicians that never get heard over here. And Jimmy was one. I actually found Jimmy. They had one of the working class man CD. It was in one of the bargain bins at Harmony House, and I bought it for like $1.
Yeah,
and I had no idea what he sounded like. He looked cool. It looked like, this might sound like Journey, or it might sound like Bon Jovi or something. And I took it home, and it was actually a record he had Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain on. and just a brilliant record. And I was like, that voice, you know, like you said, it cuts through everything. Like the guy could melt steel with his voice, and he's never lost that voice.
No, he didn't.
Like he's like what 70 something now, and he's incredible at 70 as he was at 25. And you know, it's just, you know, and nobody sounds like him. That's the other thing about Jimmy is when you hear Jimmy's voice, there's no mistaking that is Jimmy Barnes, man. Like
his talking voice sounds like it sounds like the type of guy that raised about 1,000 kangaroos. So it's like he talks
because he was actually born and raised in Scotland, wasn't he?
He's raised in Scotland, but you know, he's got that Australian accent where he's like, you know, yeah, mate, get on, and yeah, it's bloody great, mate, you know. And it's and I think they did they did a scan, an X-ray on his vocal cords, and he has like, and there's only a few singers in the world that he has like a different type of muscle.
Oh, okay. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think I can't remember. I have to look. I have to research it again. But there's some little muscle that he has that just allows him to be so reckless with his vocal cord without getting tired.
Because I did a podcast with a vocal coach about 6 months ago, and he had never heard of Jimmy. So he was one of the people I said, hey, you know, check this guy out, check out Dimash, check out Devin Townsend and Sarah Brightman. Yeah. He knew who Sarah was, but he didn't know Devin or Dimash or Jimmy. And when he heard Jimmy, he said, well, Jimmy must have had like, you know, massive vocal problems during his career. And I was like, the weird thing is he never has. And he was blown away by that fact because his first remark was the way Jimmy sings, he should have blown his voice out 40 years ago. Like, it's just, he said it was an unnatural way for somebody to sing. And I'm like, it just works for him. And, you know, I've never been able to explain the way Jimmy got the sound that he does, but it really is. It's so unique to him, but it's powerful, you know, like whether he's singing blues or whether he's singing rock or whatever Jimmy has chosen to do, you know, it's just breathtaking. So
here lies the problem. So we're growing up with those guys as our idols, then we try and replicate it, then we're the ones with the fucking vocal trauma. So, you know, so that's the issue. That's the problem. But you know, that's probably because we were trying to do the same thing. He was drinking a bottle of vodka every night before he went on stage. So we would match that and try and drink 6 beers or whatever it was. So that was the Australian culture that I grew up in, is that if you weren't partying hard, you weren't playing hard, you were a pussy.
Right.
And so
you weren't trying.
And so I was actually grateful to get my opportunity to go to America, because it's a bit different over here. I found that you didn't really have to kind of put on, I mean, obviously there's like this mysteriousness that you have to put on and like some sort of like performers, whatever you want to call it. But I always found that they were just, if you got on stage, people were just stoked you're on stage. Whereas in Australia, it's kind of like, go on, show us what you got, dickhead. You know, like, you know, so it was interesting to come over here and you get on stage and everyone's like, yeah, you can do it. And I kind of enjoyed that kind of transition, because I had been playing 6 nights a week in Melbourne with like crappy PAs and crappy monitors. So I felt like I'd done the practice of being on stage and putting in the hard work. And then now I was getting, I guess, the rewards for it in America. So that's nice. And then mum, like I said, mum coming from a classical background, I've always admired, you know, singers with big round vocals. I've always looked up to someone like Bono. Bono's father was a classically trained singer as well. And I've always found that seeing like a performance like U2 was very spiritual and very church-like, if you like. And then when this opportunity came through, when Tony introduced me to Alyson and the rest of the crew, I just jumped at it, and I told mum, and she was just beside herself. And she ended up flying over for one of the shows that we did in Dallas. She came over for 3 days all the way from Australia just to see it, and she had tears in her eyes. And but that's to have someone like her who was, you know, trained classically to come over at 78 years old and be blown away by it, I was like, okay, I think we're onto something here.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I actually, about 10 years ago, I just decided one day I was going to fly to Australia. I wanted to see Kevin Bloody Wilson in concert. And Kevin never tours in America, ever. So I was like, before I die, I'm going to see Kevin in concert. So I got on a plane just completely out of the blue, and I flew over to Perth to see one of his shows. And one of the craziest experiences I've ever had, because y'all are unmerciful to us Yankees who are like completely stupid to Australian ways. And
you have to tell him who Kevin is. Kevin is the most vulgar comedian we've ever produced.
Yeah.
He is the filthiest animal comedian we've ever produced from Australia.
Yeah.
And he's
imagine if Andrew Dice Clay sang Garth Brooks songs, basically. It's kind of like, I guess, the closest comparison.
Mhm.
But Kevin is very yeah. But he really, him and his daughter are both. I got to meet him and Jenny both, and they're wonderful people. Kevin was completely amused that I flew all the way to Australia just to see him. And he was kind of like, he's like, well, if you would have bloody well waited, I would have made it to America eventually. And I was like, yeah, but maybe not before I died, and you ain't getting any younger, buddy. So, and he's like, yeah, true. I ain't getting any younger. So, and excuse my horrible Australian accent. So, but yeah, I had a great adventure over there, and I got laughed at a lot because, the language barrier, going to a pub and being asked if I wanted a glass of piss. And I was kind of like, no. And he's like, oh, I forgot. Y'all call it beer. And I was like, oh, yeah, a glass of beer? I'll take a glass of beer. But a glass of piss? No, I'm okay. Like, so they got a good laugh over that. Sorry. So this show, where do people, it debuts, what, January 24th, right? Is it
January 21st. It's a Sunday in Tampa at the Straz Center, and people can get tickets at strazcenter.org, or you can go to our website, rockmeamadeuslive.com, and there is a ticket link there as well.
Nice. Now, is this approximately how long is the show? Is it like 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours?
Make it
until you get tired.
About 3 hours now. It's probably going to be about 75 minutes.
Nice.
Just like manageable time for everyone,
right? Like,
especially the singers.
It's one of the things, a rock show can vary, and classical shows, well, I've been to some that were short, and Dimash just released his newest concert video, and it's 4.5 hours. So, he put on the full spectacle. He's from Kazakhstan, and he did it in his capital city, and he did the whole thing, man, with all the instruments from his country and the musicians and the orchestras, and it's really just insane. Like, to think, like, 4.5 hours, this kid saying, man, like, that's it's got to be brutal on your vocal cords to sing for 4.5 hours.
And on the audience, I wouldn't go see the Beatles for 4.5 hours.
Yeah, like, I'm the old guy. Like, I remember going to concerts like Monsters of Rock, where there were 7 or 8 bands, and it was nothing. Like, you would just, now I go to a local show, and if there's more than 2 bands, I'm like, man, can we go home? Like, is this shit over yet? Like, like, my back's hurting.
No, we found that through experience that for some shows might do an intermission. We just found it there's no reason for it.
Right.
Just keep it streamlined and and it's also easier, like, to put a set list that actually has momentum together. Otherwise, you're putting 2 sets that have momentum together. And it's really hard enough to put one together. So
Right.
And
Yeah,
can I
it's
something? Some of the new tracks that have been added that Tony shared with us in the last like 3 or 4 weeks are freaking amazing. So this show is going to be a little different as well. It's like Kia's doing the mashup. What'd you call it? Ride to the Hills, Tony? You called that one? It was
you
well, I mean,
It's the Ride of the Valkyries and Running Up That Hill, Kate Bush. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
It's freaking epic. Like they're doing like what's great about what's happening with this is that Kia and I were the new kids on the block when we first joined 2 years ago, and then now Alice and Tony kind of like ask, what songs would you like to hear, and then they actually have put them into the set, which is amazing because then it makes us feel a little bit more connected to our favorite music in the show, and really about this show.
It's funny though, because when I first started, Kia knows what I'm about to say. She sends me this other Kate Bush song. I'm like, as much as I love this, I don't think anyone knows it except for you and me. I'm like, what about this Kate Bush song, which was just in Stranger Things, and it has a massive reboot.
Yeah,
and that was one of the other things that Tony and I had discussed when we were trying to create, decide what is going to go in this show. And exactly what Toby said is like, first of all, we're so lucky that the cast has been with us since the inception of this new concept show, since we really did start in earnest in like July, August of 2020, sort of height of the pandemic. And we started producing these music videos. But here we are, end of 2023, getting ready to put on our first live show. And we have the entire cast that started with us from the very beginning. And like every individual voice and instrumentalist in this show is so uniquely talented in their own right. And so we just wanted to continue to highlight all of those amazing individual talents with whatever songs and mashups we ended up creating. So that's something that I think is very unique to our show, where it's not a sort of plug in any person here or there. It's like, no, we're going to highlight Toby. We're going to highlight Kia and the other amazing members of this cast.
Yeah. And it must be a challenge too. Like Tony just said, of finding that balance of songs you love and want to perform versus stuff that people will actually recognize and know. Because
I'll give you a perfect example of what you just said, and Alyson knows this. I labored over a week and a half putting together what I thought was going to be the be all end all of knockout punches, Nessun Dorma and Comfortably Numb. And trust me, I was the one who had the hardest time on it. But because I'm like, oh my God, people are going to lose their mind. But the problem is they're both songs that are 60 BPM at best. So you put them together, and if I wanted to do justice to either song, we're looking at an 8 to 9 minute piece.
Yeah.
And I kept cutting down and cutting down and cutting down. And when I got left with it, I was like, I sent it to Alyson. I'm like, all right, I need your opinion on this. I go, because for me, I'm bastardizing both of these songs. And now what's the point?
Yeah. It's and from I think, in Tony's perspective, any creative entity, when you're in the middle of it and you're working on it, you're so close to it. Right. And so sometimes you need to send it. And this is how, Tony and I certainly work off each other. It's like, you know what? I need an objective opinion. I know somebody who knows what I'm working with, but who can also be honest.
Right. And I need somebody to tell me this sucks.
No, and I just said, I texted Tony, I said, look, I feel like we agree on 99.9% of things whenever we're sending tracks back and forth. And I was like, I got to be honest with you. I was like, I don't know if this one's a winner.
Yeah.
And then he said, Alyson, I thought the same thing. I said, okay.
I just needed to hear it from someone else. I'm like, it was so hard to let it go because I was so into the idea that as soon as Comfortably Numb comes in, people are going to go like, you've got to be kidding me. But then a minute later, they're going to be like, you got to be kidding me.
That's a challenge. I love Dream Theater, and I see them every time they come, but there are songs that they have that it's a challenge. You know, when you hit that 12-minute, 14, 16, 18-minute mark, and you're just like, okay, bro, we get it. You can play, like, like you're just showing off now. You
I
know,
know.
saw Sons of Apollo a couple years ago, and Billy did his bass solo.
Oh, yeah.
Billy is one of the most outstanding bass players, but his bass solo was like 7 minutes long.
Yeah.
And after about 3 minutes,
reason
we
for
were
that.
kind of like, we get it, dude. You can play bass. Move along, like.
Yeah. I mean, so
Like-
it's like you said, you got to keep the interest. Like one of the things I've learned, not even just with Rock Me Amadeus, but in general, like being a musician, is like there's no such thing as too much fun
Right.
when it comes to music. And the opposite of that is like so many great ideas have like fall to the wayside because people took them too serious.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you can ruin the best of ideas by getting all lofty about it and saying, oh, this, and that's why the comfortably numb thing went out the window. But in general, I mean, like, people want to be entertained. They want to have a good time. And if your version of a good time is an 8-minute bass solo, then I'm pretty sure you're standing in a room with 2 other people.
I mean, it was great. I mean, it was awesome, but it was just one of them things. Like when you go to a show and it's, Mike Portnoy and Derek Sherinian and, Bumblefoot and Billy, you already understand all of these guys are brilliant musicians. So the 7.5-minute bass solo to me was just kind of showing off because look, we know Billy can play. You don't have to spend 7 minutes showing us how you can tap and slap and do all of the, it'd be like going to a Victor Wooten show and Victor doing it. Like, we get it. Like, we know Victor Wooten can play. We know Jocko could play. We know, Fred Hammond doing a 9-minute piano solo would be sort of the same thing. We get it. We know Fred is a brilliant, outstanding musician. So, but again, some of the greatest music is just short and sweet. Going back to Joan Jett, Joan has always, I've seen her so many times live, and she keeps it sort of simple and to the point, man. It's just maximum fun the whole way, and that's what I love about Joan is she's just, she's a ball of energy, man. And
she does now. She did go through a time, and unfortunately I was in the band for that time, where it was, I don't know, she was exploring the whole Riot Girl Pacific Northwest scene, and they were writing songs about just how important it is to be a serious woman or a serious person and all this stuff. Like, nobody fucking cares about this. They want to hear you sing "I Hate Myself for Loving You." So go out there and write 10 more of those songs. Let's go on to it.
Was that the period where she was kind of filling in for after Mia was killed and all of that?
It was the whole Kathleen Hanna scene. I mean, I will tell you, I won't get too into it, but like we spent so many months in Studio 101 with Ted Templeman, which was my dream because he worked at Van Halen.
Nice.
So literally, I couldn't go in my own lounge where the pool table was because there'd be like 20 girls in there just occupying the place, smoking cigarettes, like as if there was, like no one else in the building. And I'd be like, go to get a cup of coffee and feel like, when are they leaving? They never left. And they would talk about the same shit over and over, just like, like, oh, this guy sucks and that guy sucks and this band sucks and that band sucks. I'm just like, do you guys like anything? I mean, like, nope. So, but Joan as a person is delightful. Yeah. She's, she goes out there every night and crushes it.
It was kind of funny. The one time I got to meet the band or had a chance to meet the band, the one person I was really interested in talking to the most was Sammy, because I'm a massive fan of Hanoi Rocks. And I just immediately kind of walked past everyone else and right to Sammy, and everyone kind of looked at me like, you didn't even say hello to Joan. And I'm like, I'm kind of here for Sammy, because I've been a fan of Sammy since the Hanoi Rocks days, and I know all the Joan stuff, and I know all the stuff that Ricky has done, and all the other people that have been in a band over the years. But Sammy was the one person I'd never got to say, hey, I love what you and Michael have done in some of your songs are the single most important songs for me as a person that I connect to, so
Well, I think that one of the things about this show that which is going to be when it launches and takes off and it becomes like a thing where we're on the map for real.
right.
Reach out to these people like Joan, and say, hey, we're doing New York.
Yeah.
We will customize an arrangement for you.
Right.
One of your songs, I will mash it up with something, that's
That's
that
awesome.
honors it, and but I'm gonna be like, you can't say no. You can't say no. There's gonna be too many people there for you to say no. I mean, like that's a good thing about relationships with people that you've worked with.
Right.
If they know they're gonna look good in a situation like that, there's no reason for them to say no. And of course, with this show, anybody who steps on that stage with us is going to be like, shit, I would do that again in a heartbeat, because it's just like, we're giving them this spotlight. Hey, what do you want to do?
Yeah, and it's such a great concept to think about. Like, by doing that, if you go on the road and you can do that, the pools of people you can pull from. If you roll into Detroit, there's an endless list of Detroit people, whether it's Alice Cooper or Iggy Stooge or Bob Seger or I mean, there's Stevie Wonder. There's just so many, and it's for every city, whether it's Chicago, Atlanta, LA, New York. There's this endless pool of people that.
Right. Although I think Alice Cooper lives in Arizona, but
yeah, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't care how long.
It's a great idea to do that. I mean, it'd be a lot of ambition, but it'd be a great idea to on a tour, be like, okay, we're coming to your town.
Right.
Like Halford lives in I think you mentioned it before. He lives in Arizona. And I did a song with him last year. I'd be like, we want to take a Judas Priest song and put it together with this. What do you think? Will you get up and do it with us? That would be, it'd be a shit ton of work.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we got a day off. I got to put this together. We're going to, but we would do it. And we actually did something like this on the last date of the last tour we did with Rocktopia with Mairead, our violin player. She had the idea to do it was the last night of Game of Thrones. So instead of doing her solo, she wanted to do that. And we put it together. Although the funny story behind that is this crew right here, me and Alyson, namely, we were kind of home late. Let's put it that way. We went out gambling with our investor, and all through the night of drunkenness, I'm like, I'm going to put this thing together, Game of Thrones thing. As soon as I get back to my hotel, I just remember being woken up, laying over my computer like this with somebody pounding on my door. And but somehow we got on that stage and we did it, and it was great. So I think for Rock Me Amadeus to do something like that, it'd be monstrous for artists that would like, you really going to do this? I'll do it. You do it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, I wish you guys massive success with this. I hope it gets as big as the Trans-Siberian Orchestra thing. You can go out, on these tours every year and entertain the way that they get to do it, and that type of arena where it's you have the lights, and maybe hopefully 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, I can play a small part in setting up microphones or something. If you come to Detroit,
You'll probably be like recording our records by then, or we might be too big for us, CJ.
I doubt that, but man, I just love music, and the whole goal of this is to bring the music to people who otherwise might not hear it or see it, regardless of what it is, because to me, music is the biggest healing tool that is available, and I know what it's done for me as a person, and I can wholeheartedly say I wouldn't be here without it, like all of the people I've mentioned, and even people like you guys who maybe I haven't come across before. I know that somewhere there's somebody who has seen your performance and walked away from that with a more positive outlook on life, and you never know when you can touch someone's spirit, so even on the worst days, you just kind of got to keep trying and keep pushing through, because you never know when you're going to make that mark on someone. And I know I've been touched by angels in the most unlikeliest of places. When I was going through my divorce, it was so bad and I was so low, and music was the only thing. And I went to the grocery store one day. I had $4 in my bank account, and I was so depressed, and my son wanted ice cream, and I honestly didn't have the money for it, but I was just like, you know what? Go ahead. I'll figure it out some kind of way. And I got to the checkout line, and the lady in front of me, she turned around and she's like, can I pay for your groceries? She's like, something just tells me you need a blessing. And I just broke down right there, because I didn't know this lady and I hadn't spoken to her, and there was nothing about my demeanor that I knew of that said that, but I needed it. And it just, that little bit of faith, that was restored in the fact that there are good people in this world. And,
Yeah.
That it, like I said, I'm going to start crying in a minute, but stuff like that is what drives me to want to be better and do this. And, if I can leave my mark on somebody somewhere along the line, that's what this is all for. So more than anything, I hope that's my legacy, is that I reach somebody in a positive way and maybe put them on a different path or a more positive path. So,
It's a good thought.
yeah, I'll just say thank you for the gift of music that you guys are giving. And I really hope to be able to see this at some point. And
Where are you located?
I'm just outside of Detroit, actually. I'm in Jackson, Michigan. It's known as a prison city because we have all of Michigan's prisons mostly. If you go to prison in Michigan, you start here and you end here. So, but I'm about 30 miles outside of Detroit. So, I just normally say I'm from Detroit because that's kind of the city that everyone recognizes. So yeah. So
Well, if you need a winter break, come down to Tampa, come see us. We promise to give some positive, inspirational, healing, joyous musical vibes in sunny Florida.
It's a hell of a faster flight than Perth.
Yeah, that's for sure. That was definitely one of the longest plane rides I've ever had, man. That was 16 and a half hours in cramped space. I did not have a first class ticket, so I rode 16 and a half hours in coach to Australia, and it was horrible, but fun. But I do hope to see the show. I really do, because
you'll see it, because we're going to be traveling everywhere.
That's awesome. Again, whether it's Detroit, whether it's Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, I traveled to all of those places for shows. So, if you're somebody I want to see, I'm old school. I'll get in the car and drive. So,
right. So, well, we'll make it happen.
Yeah. So I guess the last thing to do is tell everyone where to find all the information about this. Is there social media? Is there a website or anything like that where they can go and look it up and whatnot, other than just the theater name that you mentioned?
Yes. So you can find us on our website, rockmeamadeuslive.com. And our social media, Instagram, Facebook is also at Rock Me Amadeus Live. You can get tickets on January 21st at the Straz Center by either going to our website and the ticket link, or to Straz, that's STRAZ, center.org.
Awesome. So you
I can
guys
never-
go out and see this, support this, because it's important and it's awesome. Like
And we
true
rock.
musicianship. Yeah, like true musicianship is, you know, people put heart and soul into it. It's kind of rare. I mean, well, I don't want to say it's rare, but you know, I guess I call it old school now because with all of the technology now, a lot of people cut corners and do it the easy way. So, sort of the old school Jim Steinman way of actually composing and bringing big production to stuff is rarer today than you know.
You know what's funny? I have to say this because it came up yesterday. I was making dinner and I had on some random Pandora like mix channel, and that song "Reminiscing" by Little River Band came on.
Nice.
And it literally stopped me in my tracks. I was just like, "Who the fuck is playing on this track?" I mean, I was just like, "This is like, it's like perfection. It's like beyond Steely Dan perfection. Every inch of it was just like, holy shit! Like these guys actually got in a room and did this." So to your point, it's like, yeah, people cut corners now to make perfect sounding records. This was a perfect sounding record before there was anything besides a 2-inch tape machine available.
Yeah, and I mean it's still out there.
Yeah.
Toby may know. There's a band from Australia called the Teskey Brothers, and the Teskies are, when you hear them, like the first time I heard the Teskey Brothers, the first thing I thought is, this is a couple black guys from Memphis.
Yeah.
That was my first thought. And then I looked them up and it's white guys from Melbourne. And I'm like, wait, ain't no two white boys that should be able to sing the way they sing. Because Sam, when you hear Sam sing, you'd swear to God it was Al Green or Sam Cooke or Otis Redding. Like it's the most ungodly thing. And I mean, he just has soul to his bone, man. And when they recorded the record, they actually went to Ireland and bought an old reel-to-reel analog machine and shipped it back to Australia to record on, so that they I mean they're brilliant. And again, it's proof that even the younger generation, there are still those people who have that desire to carry on the tradition and the aspects of what came before them. And they're another band. If you haven't heard them, I challenge you guys to check them out, because
Definitely check it out.
yeah,
I think that's one of the great things about our show is like we're surrounded by people who are either old enough or old souls.
yeah,
To where we have the backbone of what like really inspiring music was, and we'll put that into our show as opposed to just trying to sell tickets. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like we're doing it more for the love of the music, and hoping that translates into people feeling the same when they come see us.
Yeah. Well, I will say for sure that Sam Teskey is absolutely an old soul, man. Like you can't sing like that and not be an old soul, because it's crazy. But anyways, great success to you all. Thank you so much for allowing me to do this. Tony, Kia, Alyson, Toby, you guys are amazing, and I've gotten a lot of enjoyment on growing up with some of your guys' stuff. So again, pretty surreal to be able to speak with people that I've watched as a teenager do stuff. And
that's you, Tony.
Yeah.
You've been around for a minute too, Toby. So you ain't no spring chicken anymore, brother.
Well,
I'm not either. So, one thing we can't stop is time. So, as always, you know how we wrap this up. Be well, treat each other with kindness. Remember, like I said, no matter what you're going through, music heals.